Um,
All right, so we're here with Jack Ross from Vans Without Borders. Tell us your story.
yeah, sure. So I started Vans Without Borders in March 2022, well, just after the war kicked off. So I was working in politics and journalism, writing stories all the time about Ukraine. And eventually my editor turned around to me and said, "We don't want any more Ukrainian stories. We're not sure about the truth coming out there and people are losing interest." And I thought, that's not great. And so I turned my attention more to Ukraine, doing a bit more research, started seeing the atrocities coming out of places like Bucha and Irpin, and thought I need to get over there. So I bought myself this van, funnily enough, which is a 17-seater Ford Transit minibus. It'd been converted into a motorhome, so it's got a bed and everything in and lots of space. And I set out to Ukraine with two other guys, and we started dishing out aid. Our first stop was actually in Krakow, in Poland, that's where we teamed up with you guys for the first time, and you provided us the paperwork to get into Ukraine, which was invaluable because it still took us about maybe 8, 9 hours to cross the border. But thanks to you guys, it went a lot smoother than it would have gone without the paperwork. From there, we drove straight into Kiev. We were advised not to go there because it's still largely under occupation in Bucha and Irpin. But after we arrived, the Ukrainians pushed the Russians out, and we were able to distribute aid. We were one of the first humanitarian groups into Bucha and Irpin to supply people. So we were there while there were still landmines actively everywhere, while Russian saboteurs and groups that had been cut off were still engaging in active fighting. And we went before they restored all the power and electricity. So we saw people living in something which looked like it was out of an apocalypse movie, living in tents and in lean-to shelters where they said there's no point living in our buildings because we're worried about them being bombed. And it was heartbreaking. We then pushed on to Kharkiv, and again, that was a horrific experience watching old people there, unable or unwilling to leave under direct fire with literally nothing. I've been in some of the homes in Kharkiv with the older people where their younger relatives have evacuated and unfortunately left them behind. Again, not always the fault of the people leaving, partly because the older people don't want to give up their homes, but it's tragic. It's non-stop bombing there. Since then, the team's expanded. The most people we've had in country at one time was 15 people in 6 different vehicles. And our aim and our mission is to provide aid to people who are cut off from other organizations. So we go, closest we've gone is 0.3 kilometers from the Russians. We were some of the first into Chernihiv after it got liberated. And even as recent as June, we went to some villages in Chernihiv Oblast, and they said we're the first humanitarian group to actually have reached them. And the conditions there aren't great. We spoke to people who lived in Chernihiv when it was under occupation, and they were saying anyone with a pro-Ukrainian tattoo had their arm amputated or they were simply shot in the street. I've spoken to people in Kiev who've been evacuated from the east, and one girl told us she was the only girl in her village not to be raped by Russian soldiers because her mother hid her under the floorboards and she had to hide under there as she heard that happening in their village. There's some amazing stories coming out of Ukraine in terms of bravery, but it's heartbreaking at the same time. We supplied aid to people a week ago, and we found out today that their shelter was bombed and they were living in an abandoned fire station. And unfortunately, one of the women we helped literally a week ago has had her leg blown off by this bomb. And it's so frustrating for us because these people, they're young families or older people. They've got no military attachment at all, and the Russians are targeting them for no reason other than terror. We saw it in Bucha and Irpin before it got tidied up by the Ukrainians, where tanks had deliberately swerved out of the mud onto the road to crush cars and with people inside. I've seen cars with people and children spray painted on the front of them with bullet holes in and blood all over, baby seats. In one village in Irpin, we heard that 2 of the youngest men, just because they were the only young men left in the village, were killed over 3 days by Russians with hammers. It's like something out of a medieval torture book, and it's hard for us. We don't really process emotions over here. For me, it's tough, but one of our guys was in tears the other day. We were probably about 20-30 kilometers from Donetsk, the city, delivering aid out to people, and an old lady started crying, saying the missiles are non-stop. She can see them going over her house. She's petrified she's going to be killed. She hasn't got anywhere else to go, and there were children living on this road too, and one of our guys broke down with her. But we try and show a brave face for the people we help, because we do some risky stuff, but we're able to leave. When we're at the front, we're there maybe 2-3 days, and then we pull back to a safe area. These people have to put up with the bombing every day, and it's you can see the real toll on them. The kids near Donetsk were saying at night to protect themselves from the bombs, they put blankets over their heads, and you can see just this sort of childhood naivety in war, and it is really heartbreaking to see.
Yeah, man, I can't imagine the level of atrocities that you're seeing, and obviously you guys are all from Britain, right?
We've got a few internationals in our team, but we're mainly from Britain. But we've had help from a couple of Americans, an Australian, German, Canadian. What we do, no one else is doing it, as far as I've seen. I think we're starting to see a lot of domestic people starting to do it, but in terms of international, there's very few people who go into the hot zones we go into and supply people like that. So we attract quite a lot of support, but it takes a type of person, I think, to come with us, someone who's had maybe a bit of military background or seen bits before, because it is risky, and we're one of the few teams I've heard of who haven't had any injuries. We helped a team in Kharkiv in June, and again a week later, one of their guys got killed. Another one of my friends out here from Britain, they do civilian evacuations, and one of his team got blown up by mortars. He's still alive, but he's lost his leg. And so there is a real danger to what we do. The key with us is just move quick, help people quickly, and get out there as quick as we can.
Yeah, and I know that we as Ukraine Now organization have been helping coordinate certain things for you, but what are the major needs for you as an organization and as people on the ground?
I think the key is, well, you guys are fantastic because you help with this. You drop us supplies which are brought over from Britain, because lots of people from Britain will drive supplies to Poland, but they won't come into Ukraine. And it's still very admirable of them. No one's getting paid to do what we do, but it's getting the supplies or getting funding, because we're very happy to buy all of our stuff from Ukraine and support local Ukrainian businesses. But I find most people like to give items, and they don't understand if you give, we're still very grateful for it. If you give, say £100 worth of shopping in Britain, we then have to pay the fuel to transport it across Europe. Whereas if you donate up to us £100, we could buy that in country, possibly buy more food than we could buy in Britain, and we don't have that fuel cost as well. So I think the logistics is probably the hardest issue for us. You can buy everything in Ukraine. It's fantastic to see the resilience of the Ukrainian people and keeping supply chains going. But I think that message really needs to get out to the world. If you see a group, it doesn't even need to be us, but you see a group doing good in Ukraine, donate to them, because the money will go a lot further than blankets or food will in a safe country.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that happening since the very first months of people, sending aid from United States and sending things that you could easily buy in Poland or in Ukraine. And, for people, it's hard to connect these things because they're so out of the touch with the reality. And I think having such interviews, having people like you speak about these things in detail is definitely helping. And we see it with different organizations sending stuff to our warehouse in Krakow. And obviously, we're sorting that, making our best decisions about what to send first and to where. And it's been fascinating to see those big trucks come for you guys from Britain, right? What are those organizations? How do you even connect with them?
So the people sending trucks, it's not big organizations. So people like the Red Cross or UNICEF, I think everyone's realized they're not here in Ukraine. They're not doing much to actually help people, and it's quite frustrating. But it's small groups in the UK sending those trucks. So it will be a community. We mainly work with a Norwich community, and they're fantastic. They're either Ukrainian expats or people from Poland, a lot of British guys as well, who club together to fund a lorry through a commercial company to drop supplies in Poland. And no government funding, just what they can raise locally. One of our guys, as well on my team, he went around the local pubs in Portsmouth, and they were doing raffles for him so he could raise money to come out with us. And just the community element in this is fantastic. And I think if I could relate it to something, it's very much like Dunkirk, where British fishermen just sailed over in their boats to evacuate British soldiers stuck in France. It was a bit of government organization, but it was largely people off their own back going and doing something. And I think there's a lot of love for Ukraine in Britain. And I think people really see the struggle there. And Ukraine's a country where we are welcome. We have a very similar culture. It's very hard for people to support, especially with materials, for example, places like Syria, just because of the sheer logistical problem getting out there. But Ukraine's right on our doorstep. I think it's easier for me to fly to Poland and go into Ukraine than it is for me to drive up to Scotland from my house. So there's no reason we're not we shouldn't be helping. and it's fantastic to see that the British people have risen to the challenge there.
In the first months, there were so many British volunteers that were joining and actually asking about like, hey, how do we get into Ukraine? And obviously it takes a certain kind of person, right? You know, we all have to be crazy enough to even think about volunteering. Again, a lot of people come with different complexities, psychological nuances, and all of that. And we've seen a lot of people that were not mentally prepared going to Ukraine and kind of telling them, hey, let's utilize your skills online. There's so many things that you can help with in terms of like helping the logistics, coordinating. And there's so much chaos in general. You know, in the first months, it was a complete chaos, but now we're trying to consolidate and help organizations do things better, cheaper, faster, and kind of like shifting the whole organization around that vision of, hey, there are these amazing guys on the ground. They're much better at doing things. If we would attempt to try and do them, how about, you know, we just improve their logistics? How do we you know, route the funding to them? How do we equip them with better tools and technology to do that? And tell me a bit about what you're seeing in terms of cooperating with other groups on the ground. I know that you say that there's some local volunteers showing up. Is there a system or something that you guys use to coordinate these things, or like the needs on the ground? Or is it pretty much there's so many needs that you just show up and help?
So the first people we got connected with was via you guys again, which was a church group in Kiev, and they were fantastic because they trained us how to go around the villages, how to approach so you're not intimidating. Things like don't wear sunglasses like this when you're engaging with people because you might scare them because they've just been occupied, so people can see your face and you're friendly. But also at the same time, it's a lot of our stuff is we have to find out ourselves, so we connect people up. So if we find good contacts in Lviv, we can connect them with people in Kiev and Kharkiv and try and get everyone to support. There's not really a national database. There's lots of small groups working together, and we do what we can to connect the local Ukrainian efforts up. Because we do a month on, a month off over here because we're all volunteers. We aren't paid. We have to go back and work to make sure that we can pay the rent and everything back home. But over here, you know, a lot of our work in terms of finding people and connecting with people is we'll turn up at somewhere which has been very heavily bombed, beat the horn on the van, and then work with local community leaders. So people will come out. The first time it's always manic, but that's just how it is. But then once we find people who speak English or people who are happy to work with us, we let them know we're coming in advance. And then, you know, the best result of that we saw in Kharkiv, we had 500, 600 people lined up down a street waiting for us to turn up with food. And that's the most organized we've ever done it. And it's, you know, absolutely fantastic to be able to do that and work with local people who, again, are volunteers not being paid and just want to help their communities. And a lot of these people, they tend to be younger guys or girls. They're very desperate as well, but they would rather everyone else in their community had first before them. And so we always make sure we keep a little bit back for them because they'll happily watch us hand out everything and go home and not have anything. But we want to make sure that they're okay as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of selflessness showing up, and it's amazing to hear such stories. What's next for you guys? What's the plan? I know no one can plan for ahead. We know that winter is going to be brutal. What's your plans as a team?
So we need to go back home and fundraise a bit more. My plan is to buy 2 4x4s. So we've got a contact who can sort us 2 pickup trucks for a very good price, and we want to keep dropping food to the front in winter. So I think Ukraine can go as low as minus 25 degrees. So we need funding for kit so we can have winter wear and also emergency supplies because, you know, the vans do break down. And if we break down at the front, we need something. So we've got enough food for 2 weeks. We've got a shelter we can stay in so we don't catch hypothermia. And we've got like a satellite phone so we can radio in for help. And so for us, it will be going home, fundraising and coming back in winter. As I said, we're fully aware as well. A lot of what we're doing now is giving people long-term supplies so they can actually survive in the winter. Because a lot of the people we give food to now, some of it, they eat it straight away because they're starving. Other people, they're squirreling it away so they have that in winter. Because I think the logistics are going to be horrible. If Russia continues to bomb the roads, it's not going to be feasible to repair them in winter. They're going to need ploughing. And we want to make sure we can continue what we're doing, but we need to secure the kit. But it looks like that's going to happen. And regardless, even if we don't raise the money, we've still got the vehicles we have and we'll be driving as close as we can as it is safe to do. A big worry for us too is we don't want to be those people who come over here to help and end up needing being rescued ourselves. Yeah, we're making sure it's all in place. And we work with a lot of people like British veterans. So I think 5 of my team are British veterans. We had a US veteran, and we work with people with the experience. So we know that if we do get in trouble, or if we do need to be able to survive and have the equipment to survive, we've got that squared away.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, as unorganized the war is, you guys sound pretty organized. So congrats on having these set up as basic processes and networks that you're coordinating. And I know that you're about to receive one of the deliveries from us from Poland. What's happening with that? What's your plan?
So we're currently sat at the warehouse. I'll show you the building we've been given today. We were meant to work with the army today, so unfortunately had to change the drop-off location because they've decided the army base they were going to give us. Sorry, let me turn that camera around for you. Here we go. So we were working with the army originally, but they cancelled their warehouse. What was a warehouse is now being turned into an operations centre. As you said, the war's very unorganised, so we found out about that about 3 hours ago, which is always very helpful, but it's how it is over here. And so we've updated the location, waiting for the driver, and then we're going to take it to Mykolaiv tomorrow. The supplies that are coming there. We have a very fast turnaround with things over here, and we want to make sure it gets directly to the people so we can receive even more in and then distribute more as well.
Yeah, the turnaround is important, so things don't get stuck in a warehouse and then someone has to pick it up and deal with it.
I've seen too much of it over here where we were told don't bring clothes to Ukraine, people don't need clothes. I've seen massive stockpiles of clothes in Ukraine in warehouses, and we drive to villages. We went up to Chernihiv in June, and one woman there had been in the same dressing gown since March, where her house had been bombed and she'd lost everything, and no one had reached her. And so for me it's a pet hate seeing these warehouses full of goods, sometimes even full of food, and just sitting there for weeks and weeks when there's people in dire need.
One of the big projects that we have as technology provider infrastructure, we want to consolidate the knowledge about these resources, which type of resources, where, who is able to deliver them, and just to give visibility, because I keep hearing about so much of goods being stuck in different warehouses because either organization just doesn't have money for fuel or doesn't even have transport, and they're kind of like clueless how to get it out there. And it's a common situation in Ukraine and in Poland too. There are warehouses that are stocked with things and you just don't have fuel to deliver it to the destination. Because as you mentioned, it's super expensive. The trips from Poland to Kharkiv, in terms of fuel, that's a lot of money. And obviously, as support for Ukraine is slowing down financially, and we've had a very slow summer because all of a sudden everyone forgot about the war, and no one keeps talking about it on news. I'm sure the consolidation of resources will be crucial for the winter.
Definitely. And it may be a blessing in disguise that these warehouses have held on to supplies because they are in country for the winter. As you said, it's making sure that they can actually get to the people. I know for us, in terms of money, to drive my van to Kiev, from Kiev to Kharkiv and back, it costs £600 in fuel. And that's paying £1.10 a litre. Some vehicles can move a little bit cheaper, some are more expensive, but it's a lot of money just to move supplies from A to B. And we try and restock in Kharkiv from the main supermarkets and then give it out to the people as well, just to try and keep costs down. But what you're saying is, I've had a meeting today with another group, and they said their big problem as well is moving stuff because of the sheer cost of fuel. And it goes back to my earlier point. It's all good and well donating supplies, which is great, but people don't think money for diesel is as important as supplies, because if you can't get it to the people, it's not going there. And all of my guys are paid out of pocket. Some of my guys have got bills piling up on the table at home saying you've not paid this, you've not paid that. So they've used all of their savings to come out here. One of our guys even borrowed 14 grand to buy a vehicle to come out here, and he's hoping he can go back and sell it. But then if it gets damaged or blown up over here, he's going to be stuck paying off that for a little while. Myself, I've got my business to sponsor some of this. I've used all of my personal savings for this, and it's something which I think we don't advertise because it's not, oh, look what we're doing as such, but it's the reality of the situation. Is a lot of the people volunteering over here, there's that knock-on effect, and that's why we have to go back to work, because when you're out of work for a month, most of my guys are on unpaid leave, you're losing £2,000-3,000. Then you go back and you do have to budget now. As I said, it's something which isn't always reported. As what I say to people when they try and volunteer with us, I say, have you got enough money to pay your rent for the month you're away? And that's why we lose a lot of volunteers, because people are really keen to sign up, and then they think, I might lose my house if I do. And so we say you've got to be squared away back in your home country before you come over here, because you don't want to end up becoming dependent, or even in a situation without heating or electric because you've helped over here. You want to make sure you've got a little bit of savings, can come over, help, and then go back and resume your life, and have not too much damage.
Yeah, you're bringing up a very valid point about the initial onboarding of volunteers that are extremely passionate, but may have some of the things that that they are attached to in their real life, the life, the regular life, the financial commitments, the family commitments, all of these things. We keep seeing them, and it only takes you a couple of questions to really get them on the right set of kind of expectations for the whole experience. So I totally resonate with what you're describing, and it's definitely a lot of work to onboard volunteers, to even catch them up on all the nuances, the things that you learn from the local communities, churches, how to behave, how to drive to villages, and all of that. It's a lot of knowledge, hopefully. It's the knowledge that keeps propagating, and as you guys come back to Britain and then come back to Ukraine, there's probably another wave of volunteers, and you'll be able to help them and coach them and all of these nuances. But yeah,
Well, we love for people too. If people come out and work with us for a month and then decide they want to stay a little bit longer, we love people to share the knowledge of what we're doing so other people can come. By no means will I say people should jump into it blind, because it is dangerous. It is a war, and that's something we always emphasize. But back to your earlier point too, if people want to volunteer in safe countries, that's still really effective. For me, it's a logistical nightmare. We don't have a support team back home, and we could do with people at home helping us orchestrate deliveries. So when I'm in Kharkiv or when we're at the front, we're not thinking, crap, we've got something coming into Krakow, how do we get it to us? There's someone else who can help, and that's still a really important role. Same with people going and fundraising back home, doing events locally, things like raffles at pubs or bingo nights, or anything and everything, lemonade stands even, whatever they want to do which could contribute. And these things tend to be very effective. And I know fundraising for Ukraine is hard, but if you can do it from a community element and things like stalls or meat raffles, you contact companies will donate maybe £100 or £50 worth of goods, and you can put together hampers, you can raffle them off and raise a lot of money for no real expense to yourself except for your time.
Yeah, and it's a point that many people don't understand, that there are people on the ground when you're driving there, evacuating people, bringing supplies. You don't have time to fundraise, do marketing, social media, kind of like promotion, website building, sign up forms, all of these, like all the logistics of the fundraising. And that's what we keep seeing with different organizations on the ground. And it's our ultimate goal to build more of these tools to be able to help guys like you. But yeah, thanks a lot for the sharing your story. I'm fascinated with the level of organization that you guys actually have, and super grateful for all the work that you've been doing. Super proud of the fact that we're able to help you with however small resources that we have, but it all adds up. And I know that we help you, other organizations help you, and that's how the magic happens.
Definitely. And you help connect the dots. People can donate a lot of stuff in the UK, but if it's sat in Poland, there's not much we can do, and you help it reach us, and that's invaluable. So thank you so much for everything you do for us, and we wouldn't be able to operate without that.
Thank you, Jack. I'm gonna pause the recording quick.